Over 70% of your shots on the golf course are played with inside 100 yards. And almost all of those shots are either a chip, a pitch, or a bunker shot. So we could say that this is the most important part of the game, and these are the most important clubs in your bag. And that's why I've teamed up with Clubhouse Golf to bring you the ultimate short game guide. I'm going to run you through the easiest technique to play those 3 shots, but we're also going to take a deep dive into the golf club. You're going to learn the easiest technique and also figure out which wedge is best for you and your game. Let's start with a basic chip. We need to cover setup. The key thing when you're chipping around the green is that setup, your weight needs to be forward. At the end of your backswing, your weight needs to be forward. At impact, your weight needs to be forward. We have to do that. What that does, it helps us get a little bit steeper into the golf ball, helps us with strike, and from here, strike is really, really important. If you can strike it well, you'll often be relatively close. So we're going to have a very, very narrow stance with the feet slightly flared. I like my heels to be around about the width of a club head wide. I'm going to use my knees and my hips, and I'm going to lean forward into my lead side. I feel a significant amount of weight on this lead side, probably 75–80% of that weight. Then I want the ball behind me. That's my sternum. So if I drop that club from my sternum, you can see how it falls, you know, some 3 to 4 inches in front of the golf ball. So the ball is behind me. What that's going to do is fairly naturally give me some shaft lean. So you can see the shaft length forwards because the butt of the club is over the inside of my lead thigh. I also want to stand in a little bit closer to the golf ball. What that does, raises the club shaft up, helps me swing that club a little bit straighter back, a little bit straighter through, gives the face a little bit less rotation. So when I sort of sole the club out, I'm going to raise the handle up and walk in a little bit closer. So I've got weight forward, I've got ball back, I've got lead shoulder low, and I'm standing in nice and close. I've got something down here which is going to help me with my attack angle. I want to be a little bit steeper into the golf ball. This little device, this strike wedge, is behind there to sort of guide my club in on that steeper angle of attack. If we get the setup wrong, I'm going to make contact with that probably in the backswing and the downswing. And then we've got an alignment stick. This is for shape of swing. The last thing we want to do with a chip is drag the club too much inside, which causes you to be too shallow. I'm working the club this way in front of the alignment stick, so I feel like the club is working very much up, which is going to allow it to work very much down, which helps me with strike. Then use my body to rotate and get taller. Notice how my body is rotating and I am extending. Rotation and extension. If I don't do that, my arms are always going to sort of buckle this way, or my lead wrist is going to break down. I'm going to thin them, I'm going to fat them, I'm not going to get that consistency. And that one is a much, much better result. How are your wedges going to affect these shorter shots around the greens? Well, in my hand, I've got 2 identical wedges in terms of the loft, but we've got a high bounce and we've got a low bounce. So if you're someone who tends to play softer conditions, wetter golf courses, something like a high bounce is often going to work better. It can help the club move out of the ground. If you're someone who plays firmer conditions, we think in links type golf, lower bounce might be your best option. I should find this club works out of the ground much easier. I think I've carried it a little too far. It's not too bad. There's a little divot there, but nothing that's too extreme. Now this one is the low bounce. Now straight away, as I start to make some practice swings, there we go, straight away, have a look at that. I mean, that was a practice swing. That wasn't even my shot, but straight away you can see that I took a little divot. These are the practice swings before with a higher bounce. What I'm expecting here is a little bit more interaction with the ground and definitely a different feeling through impact. Pitching. Now this is different to chipping because when we start to move back away from the green, I reckon I'm 50-odd yards that flag, we start to need to have the ability to vary not only the distance but also the flight. Similar to chipping, that I want to be weight left and I want that ball to be behind my sternum. So again, if I drop that club from my sternum, the ball should be behind that. I'm going to start to have my feet a little wider. So we spoke about the heels being 1 club width. They're probably now closer to 2. My feet are still flared out, but I'm still setting weight into my lead side and I've got the handle a little bit forward. You will notice, however, that the ball isn't quite as far back as it was for the chip. So I'm doing everything the same, I'm just almost softening it a little bit. Now the key thing here for this basic mid-flight shot is I want to be kind of limiting what I do with my wrists. It's very easy on these shorter shots to feel like we can do all of the work with our hands and our arms. You can see how I can move the club a pretty good distance around my body just with my hands and arms. It's quite tempting to do that. What I'd love you to do is feel like the hands are a little bit more passive, and so the movement of the club is a little bit more through what your body's doing. Now there is going to be some wrist set here, some wrist action, which we need for a little bit of speed in the club to help us get back to that flag, but the core motion is a body turn, with the arms moving because of what the body's doing, as opposed to what so many golfers do is they use lots of hands and arms. The issue when you use lots of hands and arms is it's very difficult to control strike, and very often the ball pops up really high. We'll come to why that is the case in a moment. The focus should be target side of the ball. Similar to what you said with chipping, it's so important with these pitches that as we rotate, we push up away from the ground. What that does is it naturally gets the club to move up away from the ground. Notice how when I turn and rotate, the club moves up away from the ground. That's not because of what my hands are doing, that's because of what my body's doing. So we want to be in this end position where the club is almost pointing at the target because of what the body's done. So we need to have the ability to vary that flight. That's when equipment becomes really important. But let's go through technique first. So the first thing I can do, and I really want to touch on two things that you've got available to you. Ball position, which is going to massively change the loft of the club. If I move that ball more underneath my sternum, I'm going to have less shaft lean, the club is going to have more loft. If I move that ball much further back of my sternum, that puts more shaft lean, and that club has effectively got less loft. So I'm not seeing this as a 60-degree lob wedge, I'm seeing it as a tool that I can use and manipulate and change to create the shot that the golf course tells me I need to hit. The second thing you've got available to you is what you do with your hands and arms. We spoke about taking the wrists out. They're not being taken out completely, but they are more passive. If we introduce more wrists here, more wrists here, we are going to be increasing the height and the launch angle of the shot. So when we've got those two things at play, we've got ball position, we've got wrists, less wrists is lower, more wrists is higher. We've got two things there that we can tap into to create a different ball flight. So let me go ahead and show you what I can do to hit a much higher shot. And let's visualize maybe the flag a little bit more to the front of the green, almost where that first golf ball is there. So I'm going to be playing the golf ball from the same setup, but a lot more underneath my sternum. Notice how the club shaft is more vertical. And then through the motion, I'm going to be still using my body pivot, but I'm going to be using more wrists going back, more wrists, more release or more throw of the club on the way through. Significantly different, much higher, softer landing. I would need that if I had less green to work with or I required a higher shot. How does equipment then play a role? We have wedges out there which have different camber. So camber is basically almost at the shape of the sole. So this particular wedge here has got a four-way camber, which means that it falls off on the toe, the heel, the trailing edge and the leading edge. And what that means is it's a very versatile golf club. So if you're somebody who does like to play different shots from here, you do like to put the ball back in the stance and drive it in lower, you do like to open the face a little bit and add some height, you do like to vary the trajectory, vary your setup, vary your technique, it's a great option because it's very, very versatile, because it gives you the option to hit all those different shots. And it's all to do with not the loft, but the sole and how it's designed in the shape and the grind on that sole. So let's start off in practice with this sort of cross that we've placed in the sand here. A line directly back from the ball and then a line directly at my flag. When it comes to alignment, I want you to be neutral. So you can see that my toes are pretty much at the flag. I know so many of you have been told to aim left. I would rather you aim neutral, come to why in a moment. Then we've got this line around about a club head width inside my heel. So the ball is forward, you can see that my stance is relatively wide. I'm then going to set my feet in, that gives me an idea of how much sand there is, plus it takes that circle that I swing on and lowers it, helps to make sure we hit the sand first. And then with knees and hips, you'll notice that my head isn't going to move, but with my knees and my hips, I'm going to be pushing forwards and putting pressure through this lead foot. I almost feel like my lead knee gets pushed out over the foot. That's going to be my setup. Now I do want to open the face a little bit. You don't have to go crazy and get it sort of laid back as much as this, but a little bit open of the face pushes that trailing edge down, makes it a little bit easier for the club to interact with the sand. And provided that ball position is correct, you should have pretty neutral shaft alignment. Not forward, not back, pretty neutral. So as I get myself comfortable here, that would be pretty much my setup. Neutral alignment, ball forward, weight forward, face open, shaft neutral. Pretty simple. The key thing now is to make sure that we swing towards our target. I do not want you cutting across the golf ball, because what that does is it causes your energy to be going somewhere other than our target. And that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. If we want the ball to go towards the target, we need to have the club swinging in that direction. In terms of a swing thought, this is so simple. This is brilliant. You can do this on the golf course. You're going to take the sand that's around the ball and put it on the green. Does two things. Number one, it starts to get you away from hitting into the sand and gets you to think a little bit more about hitting through the sand, because we're trying to project it this way. And it also gives you a real instinctive sense of the speed that you'd need. You wouldn't use low speed to get that sand on the green. So it's brilliant for visual, splashing the sand out towards the target, and also the speed that you need. That's going to come up a little short, I think. But do you know what? That felt so easy. That felt absolutely easy. I've contacted the sand, I'm going to say some 3.5 inches before the ball. So the ball came out on a cushion of sand. It felt really easy. Yes, I'd like to be a little bit closer, but I tell you what, if you can do that every single time with the bunkers, you're going to be in a much, much better place. In terms of a wedge, what you absolutely need to look for is two things. Number one, a wide sole. You can see how this MG5 wedge here in my hand is the SX grind. You can see how that sole is much wider than one of the other models with lower bounce. That wider sole makes it so much easier for the club to work through the sand. And you also need higher bounce. This one's got 11 degrees, which you can get higher than that, but you want to avoid anything down in the sort of 4, 5, 6s. So high bounce, wide sole is going to make your bunker shots so much easier.